And I remember being on the floor and crying and telling God, I'm sorry. All I know is that when I lifted my head, the room was like a soccer stadium. When they turn the lights on in the beginning, it's so bright, a brightness that you can't comprehend. And that's when I heard God's voice. And now my friends, they see me about 5, 6 days later. Hey, you want a cigarette? No. Do you want a drink? No. They said, what happened to you? They said, your face is glowing. And that's when I had to tell them, well, God was in my apartment. And they all laughed because they're drinking and smoking, saying, God was in your house. I said, yes. And your little apartment, I don't know how, but he was in my house. I've been with him for 3 days. They thought I was on drugs.
So, Tom Hayden, great to meet you. You've had divine experiences for like the last half century. First encounter with God as a teenager 50 years ago, and there have been many since. One such encounter with the divine lasted 3 days. You've witnessed many, many miracles over the years, and miracles still happen virtually every day with you. So much to cover. Can't wait to dive into it all. But this is your first ever proper interview about your incredible life story. Why now?
I think it's just God's timing that he wanted this. When I became a Christian many years ago in the 80s, when dramatic things happened, I couldn't explain them. You see miracles, you see things okay, and being reserved because I was a Catholic before, and so when I come into the spirit life, I was in shock. So every time something happened, I'd go back to prayer, and I said, oh, what do I do with this? And I didn't have a place for this. And I told God, I don't want to speak about things that are miracles and things without you. I mean, the whole idea of being in the church is about you. So I made a promise to myself that I would just preach the word, and I would live a life where these things were happening, but I wouldn't broadcast them as an everyday experience. I was 20 years a Christian, and nobody knew my background. And then one day in 2021, God said, I want you to write your testimony book. I said, oh, that old stuff? I mean, what do we talk about these for? And he said, no, everything has value. I want people to know that you're a man of God and you're a Christian. And these things happen is not by accident, but it's by a choice. And there's a responsibility factor that comes with this. And he always said to me many years ago, if you'll pay the price, these things will happen. And now here I am all these years later. I know what the price is now.
So you're known as Prophet, Tom. That's the name on your website. And that's quite a biblical term that I first came across. It's not often you hear prophet these days. Can you explain to me how the name come about and what that means to you?
It's not something I chose. When I had my experience in 1982, August 15th of 1982, when God showed up, Jesus didn't show up the day I called out to God. It was God, the Father, showed up. I knew it was him. And so when he was there, it was actually, he was in my house. And one of the first things he told me, which I didn't know was in Scripture, he said, Tom, you are my son, in who I am well pleased. I didn't own a Bible. And I remember on the floor, I was crying. I said, how can I please you? I didn't do anything to earn that. And he said, you cannot earn this. It's a free gift. And so then he started talking to me in those 3 days. And he said, I've called you. He said, I knew you in your mother's womb. I didn't know that was Scripture in Jeremiah. And he said, I've called you out of darkness into my light. Again, I didn't know this is Scripture. And he said, I'm calling you to be a prophet. And I said, what is a prophet? What is this? I'd never heard these words. And so, of course, being naive and being young, I was in my 20s, you ask questions. When you're young and you don't know, you ask God pretty direct questions. You don't know. When you get older, you get afraid. When you're younger, you just ask. And so I said, where do I go to school for this? He said, there is no school. Okay, well, what books do I read? He said, there are no books. There's no school, there's no books. How do I become this? And he said, walk with me. Hold my hand and walk with me. And he said, if you will walk with me, you will become this. He said, I didn't say, can you walk with me or will you? He said, if you will walk with me. You don't understand that when you say yes today, the whole world will be against you. Everything that's in this world will be against you when you say yes. He said, but you have to make an agreement, a covenant with me and yourself that you will not let go, no matter what comes, what happens, that you will hold on to me. That was a promise that I have to went back to many times, to that if I held on to him and stayed close through prayer and through reading and different things, that the relationship would develop and I would one day become that. So I think I was functioning in the prophetic for many years. And then in 2004, that's when God said, you need to accept the title of prophet. And I'd been in preaching maybe 22 years. I said, no. If I say this, they're going to not like me. They're going to throw rocks. My church people are going to hate me. Nobody wants a name tag. Everybody wants to be a brother and a sister. They all want to have fellowship, but no titles. And he said, it's not a title. It's who you are. It's who you are as a person. It's not what you do. And there was pushback, of course, and people would say, why can you say this? Who do you think you are? And so there was always evidence to prove that what I was saying was correct. I used to say, God, you need to back me up if I am right. And he has many, many times.
Yeah, I love it. And I'm looking forward to diving into each of these really huge experiences, which clearly will be unforgettable for you. But firstly, just so we can give the viewers an overview of your unique relationship with God. You've got this clear communication with him. Can you please explain how that actually works each day?
Well, it started actually in the beginning when I first became a Christian. Now, when I was a Catholic, I went to church Wednesdays and Sundays, and I gave the offerings, and they're typical, but it was very dry. If you were praying, it's just you went and lit a candle and you said a prayer, and it's like throwing money in a fountain. You hope God hears you. But when I became a Christian, the day I met God in August of 82, I just had a desire to get a Bible. But I had a habit where I was reading 4 hours a day, and I was reading and writing notes. So I'd read something, I would say, God, if this is you, speak to me, make the words bigger or something. I was like a child. And so I was reading, something would come alive off the page. I would write the page number, the time of day. I didn't want to miss anything. On the clock, it's 2:00 and this. And when I was finished, I read all the scriptures together. I just read them, and that spoke to me. That's how God spoke to me. So for the first 3 years of my Christianity, I was not in the church. I was praying 3 or 4 hours a day and reading my Bible 3 or 4 hours a day for 3 years straight. Every single day, I was doing this. It was just me and God teaching me, like I was his personal student. So that's how him and I became close in the beginning.
So initially, it was like the words were jumping out at you more. In the early stages, you weren't hearing anything like audibly or anything like that.
I did hear him audibly. It was like somebody speaking in a room, and you turn around because you think you hear a voice. And back then, he guided me with some very odd experiences. I mean, I'll tell you this one. This is one of the first times that he did something prophetic for me, and I didn't understand. I was in the church in early evening. I was in the church in the prayer room praying. I'm praying about important stuff. And in the middle of this important stuff, I hear a voice saying, go to the store and buy a gallon of milk. I'm thinking, what? Go buy a gallon of milk. And so I dismissed it, and then it came back. I said, okay. So I left the church. I go to the store, corner store. I buy a gallon of milk. I don't drink milk at all. It's not one of my things. I'm standing outside of the store with a cold gallon of milk. I said, okay, God, now what do I do with this milk? He said, go down the street 2 blocks and take a right. So I'm walking down a block of houses, maybe 15 houses, walking in the front with a gallon of milk going, what am I doing? And eventually God said, I want you to stop here at this house. And so I stopped. He said, I want you to go and knock on the door. I was scared. This is the first time I had ever done anything outside of hearing God from me about me. And so I went to the gate, knocked on the door, and a young woman, probably, I don't know, in her 20s, was holding a baby that was crying on her shoulder. She was shaking the baby, trying to give it. And I said, I don't know if you're going to believe this, but I was in the prayer room at the church, and God said to buy a gallon of milk and to come to your house. Do you need milk? And she stood there, she was crying. And she said, my husband is working, the baby is hungry, and we had no milk. And I was praying, God, I need something for the baby. In Scripture, it says that firstborn males are God's property. So I'm a firstborn male. In my family, I was 3 months premature. So I was born at 6 months. I was dedicated to God 1 hour after I was born. So I was only on this earth 1 hour. They gave me back to God. And so then that was that. At 5 years old, I accepted Jesus. I was in a vacation Bible school with other children. I had gave my life to Christ at 5. And then when I was 7 years old, I was fixing my bicycle, like most little boys at 7. And I put the screwdriver under the tire. And when I put the screwdriver, it was under the rubber. So it wouldn't come out. And so I pushed. And when I pushed down, it came back and impaled me in my right eye. So here I am kneeling on the ground, and I had a screwdriver literally impaled all the way in my eye. And it was only 7. As of today, after all these years, I'm still blind in my right eye, have been my whole life.
And then it was another 7 years later, you were hospitalized with more serious health issues. What exactly happened then?
So I was in the hospital when I was 14, and that's when I had ulcerative colitis. And it took out, I had 19 surgeries over the next 10 years. So they've taken out virtually everything that's on the inside. So I wasn't happy. And then again, but see, God is nothing catches him off guard. And here I was at 14. At that time, I was involved with, like all the other kids, New Age stuff and 8 balls and a Ouija board, just playing games like all this with all the other kids. But a couple of years later, I was 17. Now, mind you, I was 17 like any boy. I was partying. When I say drugs, I don't mean like today. I mean, drugs to us back then was pot, the most marijuana. And so we were going to see, to have some beer and go see some girls, maybe dancing or something. That was the party. It was simple. But I went with my friend to his house. His mother, her family was Polish. They were Catholics, Polish. And I was at their house and waiting for her son to come from the shower. And he said, if you see my mother, you stay away from her. She's very weird. She has a prayer bench in her room, and she prays all the time. He said, sometimes I come home, there's like a white cloud in her room. He went to the shower, and this woman comes around the corner. Now, mind you, I was 17, had no relationship with God at all. And she came into the room, almost robotic. She walked into the room and sat down. My eyes were fixed on her. She came and sat across the dining room table, and she looked me straight in the face. She said, I have a word from God for you. And I looked at her and said, God? God who? That's what I was. God who? I had no reference. I didn't know who God was. Now, this lady, she was older, and she did not know anything about the previous couple of years of my life. And she sat there and she started telling me, she said, God said, I saw you when you were in the hospital a couple of years ago. I was with you. I was holding your hand. And he said, I'm sorry that you had to go through this. And so she started explaining what the doctors did and what my body, and I'm thinking, there's no way she could know all these things.
This was one of the surgeries for your gut problems?
Oh, yeah. Even her boy that I was out partying with, he didn't even know. He was one of my best friends. He didn't know. And she described everything to the T of where they cut, what they did. I'm thinking, and she said, God said, I allowed this to happen so in the future You will have a great testimony. I'm going to heal you. What man took out, I'm going to put back. And no man's going to take credit for this but me. And there were other things. Of course, this is all written down in my testimony book that I came out a couple of years ago. And I'm not trying to sell a testimony book, by the way. But I left there and my head was spinning. I said, God spoke to me. Who's God? Who's this lady? How does she know all these things? I had so many questions. And a few years later is when I became a Christian.
15th of August, 1982. That is a date that Tom will never forget. That's when God showed up at his flat in St. Petersburg, Florida, and his presence was there for 3 days straight.
I don't know whether it's brave or dumb, but when you're 24 and you meet God, it's like meeting your favorite soccer player or something. You got one chance to say something. You just say it. You blurt this out. And of course, when God was in my house, I asked him, "Where, if you're God, where were you? How come these things in my life? How come all these things are happening to me? If you're God, where have you been?" I almost called him a liar, which would be kind of hard, but I was challenging him because he was saying, "I've always been with you." And I was looking at my life from the human perspective. And I said, "No, you've not been with me. Where? Where have you been with me?" And that's when he said, "Do you remember this?" And in my mind, I could see I was in a car, a 1969 Buick Wildcat, drunk, very drunk, with another friend. And we were speeding, and I hit some bumps, and the car flipped 3 times. God said, "Do you remember that?" And I said, "Yeah, there was a visible hand on my shoulder. I felt like I was pinned in my seat. I didn't fly around my car. My friend was bouncing everywhere, and I was not." He said, "You should have died. That was me." And then he went back and he said, "Do you remember this?" And I saw me as a young man, 17 or so. And unfortunately, I was involved with gangs. They don't have gangs in Scotland.
They do have some, maybe not as big and bad as the US ones.
Yeah, I know. Back in the day, we were more bad. And I was in fights all the time. So with knives and all kinds of stuff. And God said, "Do you remember this?" I was looking at the back of me and I was in the fight and I could see these things and people were all around and chains and things are going. And then there was a man who had a knife I could see beside me. In the fight, I couldn't see this, but in this view, there was a man who was coming with a knife beside me. He was coming straight at my side and somebody pushed him out of the way and I went another direction. God again said, "You should have died. I saved you."
So you were seeing visions of this in your head?
Visions in my head. He was bringing me backwards in my life. And he said, "You remember this?" And he brought me all the way back. And I saw me when I was 5 years old. I said, "Those are my green sneakers. I love those sneakers." I had holes and everything. And he said, "That's you." And I saw it was a Baptist church that had a vacation Bible school. And me and all the other children were walking to go to the church in the summertime. And I said, "That's me. That's me." He said, "Yeah." And this time when I saw the church, I saw an image of Jesus over the church where his hands are out and all of his children were going to the church. And he said, "Do you remember this?"
"I'll take Jesus."
And I was in the class and I saw myself saying, "I'll take Jesus," and raise my hand. He said, "You gave your life to me when you were 5. Whether you understood it or no, it doesn't make any difference. When you gave your life to me, I accepted it. I took it. So I've always been with you, but I couldn't interfere. You had free will. If we work together, it's different, but I've been able to be involved in your life without making the choices for you. I've protected you and saved you. So you can't say that I haven't been there. You have to make a choice. Before you didn't know me, but now if you want to walk with me, then we will walk together. So I said, "Okay, how long do we have to do this?" Again, the question, how long? How long do I have to walk with you on this earth? And he said, "Well, pick a number. What do you want?" I said, okay. So I thought about it, and then I came back with a number. I said, I want to live this many days. He said, okay. We cut a covenant, and I tell people, I know when the end of my days is. I know the last day I'm going to be here. I know how old I'm going to be. I know where I'm going to be. I already know that. And I tell my friends, they said, nobody could know that. I said, you never asked the question. And if you did know the end of your days, what would you live in between those days? How would you live your life? What would you do? So I know when the end of my life is, so and then that plays into, it's not a promise God made, but a covenant we made. Covenants are different than promises.
This is quite mind-blowing here. I don't know if I've ever heard that before in my life, if someone knows. Are we talking the exact date? You know you're going to pass on, you know that. Have you told people what it is?
Well, I've been preaching for 40-something years. Sometimes I'll say it in just passing. And, of course, they say, well, no man can know this. And I say, okay, I leave it alone. I don't try to explain people. I know some years back, my mother used to say, stop telling your brothers and sisters that you're going to outlive them because you're scaring them. But I told people, my friends said, why can you say this? I said, do you know what a covenant is? A covenant, not a promise, but a covenant. I said, when God makes a covenant, he can't break it. So there are covenants in the Old Testament. When he makes a covenant with you, you've made a decision in agreement together that this is law. Basically, it's binding. And so him and I, when I discussed that and I said, I want this, I knew that I had, from that point to this point, this was my in-between. And I need to do and to be the best person I can be. And I tell people, we cut a covenant of life that I would live this long. He said nothing was going to hurt you or take you out. You cannot die. It doesn't scare me that I know that. But what it's done is given me strength that when I come against the adversary or the enemy, if I'm fighting for other people or praying for people, I've been in Africa, South America, I faced witch doctors, all kinds of sicknesses. I mean, I faced death numerous times, and you get to the point, you get into the face of death and say, you can't have me. You can't have me because I have a covenant with God. I have an agreement with God. You cannot take me before my time. It's not possible. It doesn't mean you're not going to battle sickness. It doesn't mean you're not going to go through things, but you realize the outcome of that thing cannot take you home to heaven premature. When God showed up, at that time, I was a non-Christian marriage. My wife was out. We were broken. She was living with another man. We had a 6-month-old child. I was drinking a fifth of whiskey a day, a fifth a day, 3 packs of cigarettes, depression, drugs from the doctor, and marijuana. People used to ask me, do you have a girlfriend? I said, yes. I go to the store every morning at 9 o'clock. I come home with a little brown bag. That's my girlfriend. We go and sit in the house and I drink. The blinds were closed. My life was at the bottom. There was nowhere to go. Again, this is in my testimony book, but it's kind of odd because my testimony book goes into much more detail. I mean, more than we'll ever get into in this place. But where I lived was in a garage apartment upstairs. There's maybe 600 square feet. That's all, small. And my downstairs neighbor was, if you can believe it, she was a witch, a practicing witch, New Age witch, into the New Age and the occult and stuff. And she was also an alcoholic. She was probably in her 40s and had a boyfriend who was 20. I mean, so it was crazy. And I came home one day and I heard her say, Tom, come in here. I want to show you something. So I go in the house and I'm looking at them. I'm saying, what is going on? They're in there drinking. And on the TV back in those days, it was Jim and Tammy Baker. They had a program called the PTL Club. That's what the name was. And it was Jim and Tammy Baker. They were evangelists from the Assembly of God. I said, what is this? Who are those people? They look like mannequins. It's not real. And they said, no, those are Christians. I said, what's a Christian? They said, we watch this program every day and we curse the TV. We curse this man and his ministry and his church. And we we speak curses over him. I'm looking at them thinking, you people are drunk. I don't know what, it's just crazy. She said, no, watch this. This is the fun. This is the good part. And for those viewers that are old enough, they would know. So the man's wife got on there to start singing a gospel song. His wife was known for very heavy makeup, lots of makeup. And so she would sing, but when she would sing, she would cry. And the makeup would just run down her face. Oh, Jesus. And the makeup's pour. I'm thinking, what are you watching on the television? And so, but the funny thing was, there was something about her voice that caught my attention. So I went upstairs, but the sound of her voice bothered me. I couldn't get out of my head. And then I said, well, maybe I'll put this program on the TV to see what's going on. So I started watching the program on my own. I started watching it, and then I remembered her voice sounded like my mother. When I closed my eyes, I could hear my mother's voice singing, not that song, but the tone. And I remember my mother when I was 4. My father was an Irishman and a drinker. He beat my mom so bad he broke her nose and her blood was everywhere. But I remember being a little boy at that age and my mother holding me with blood everywhere, singing. It sounds crazy. She was singing Patsy Cline music, which was just the music of the day back in the 50s. She was singing that song to us. My little brother was there. There was 2. And she was singing that song to comfort us. And that's when I thought, that's where I heard this. And so I saw the program one night, and Jim said, we have 10 minutes left. He said, there's a man in the audience. I want you to come. I want you to tell your story. And I thought, okay. So I looked, a man come out of the audience, Mark. He had a pair of work boots on, jeans, a flannel shirt. I said, hey, that man looks like me. So he was sitting there and he was describing his story. His mother got married this age. So did mine. His father this. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, me too. I'm sitting there going, yeah, me too. Me too. Me too. He said, when I was 5, I accepted Jesus. Me too. I'm going, yeah. And I'm leaning towards the set. And when he started talking about Jesus, it made no sense. It's like he went off. And then the man leaned forward. He leaned forward on his knees and he pointed the thing and he said,
God sees you out there.
I had never seen anybody say these type of things. And he said, God sees you. He said, you're sitting on a brown couch. And I look, yeah. He said, you have a green carpet on the floor. Yeah. You have a bottle on the table. Yeah. And so I'm thinking, this man is in my living room. I mean, how do you know these things? And he said, you need to get and kneel down now and give your life to Jesus. I kid you not, it was like a fish hook come to the TV set and something grabbed me. And I was pulled off my couch and on to the floor. And the next thing I know, the TV is off. At that time in my life, I was 24. I said I had not laughed or cried in 3 years. Sounds crazy, but when your life is so bad and so hard, emotionally, you get affected and hurt. That's the first thing that goes. Laughter you can't. And nothing to laugh is no funny. And you get so hurt with the pain, you just dry up. And I remember being on the floor and crying and just crying and telling God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know why I was saying that, but here I am crying for the first time in 3 years. And I was sobbing to the point. And all I know is that when I lifted my head, the room was like a soccer stadium. When they turn the lights on in the beginning, it's so bright. And I was in it, and there was a white cloud in the room. And it was just a brightness that you can't comprehend. And that's when I heard God's voice. And he said, you are my son, in whom I am well pleased. That made me cry more. I said, my life's a mess. I didn't do nothing. I did nothing to earn anything. When you're a young boy, if you do something nice, you get something. You do your chores, you get the dinner. It was always that way of living. And here I am, somebody saying that they were happy and pleased with me And I'm thinking, my life was a complete mess. I've done nothing to make you happy. He said, there's nothing you can do to make me happy. I love you. You were my son. I'm pleased with you. I'm thinking, how can you be happy with me? Look at the mess my life is. He looked right past all that because his love, unconditional love, doesn't see mistakes. Our human love judges people based on what we see, what they do. If you walk straight long enough, then I can believe you. God's going, no, I just love you. That started the whole journey. And now my friends, they see me about 5, 6 days later. Hey, you want a cigarette? No. You want a drink? No. They said, what happened to you? I said, why? They said, your face is glowing. What happened? And that's when I had to tell them, well, God was in my apartment. And they all laughed because they're drinking and smoking, saying, God was in your house. I said, yes. And your little apartment, I don't know how, but he was in my house. I've been with him for 3 days. They thought I was on drugs, but they saw a change in my life that I never went back to. When God delivered me from all those things, because I didn't know him. The first night I would go to bed, and I tell people, if you drink, you never dump your alcohol out, not at night. You may get up in the night, want some. And I said, I don't know who you are. I don't really know who I'm talking to here, but if you're God, can you take this bottle from me? And I poured it out in the sink, and I went to bed. I get up the next morning. There was no withdrawals, no desire for alcohol. Then the second night, I said, okay, if you're really God, can you take the cigarettes? I've been smoking for 14 years, which, almost 3 packs a day. My lungs are bad. If you're God, can you do this? I ripped the cigarettes up and went to bed. The next day, nothing. No withdrawals, no nicotine, nothing. And within 4 or 5 days, my whole house was clean. The trash was out. The windows were open. The birds were singing. I looked at telephone poles. I saw a cross everywhere. I couldn't explain it, but I couldn't deny what happened. When I first encountered him, he did so many things for me that I could say, I love you, but it was because he did stuff. It was about 3 years into the relationship where something clicked one day. I don't know what happened, but I changed from I love you because of what you do for me, but into I love you for who you are. Something switched into that if he did nothing else for me, I didn't care. And I said, when I started loving him for who he was instead of what he did, the relationship dramatically changed. Now we started becoming closer, like a son and a father, being able to sit and to talk and to converse. 'Cause in the beginning, it's like, well, can you fix this? Hey, I need gasoline for my car. Hey, I need some food. And I'm grateful for what he does for me. I'm very grateful. But it's my relationship that I cherish the most with him. And that's where you spend time with him, talking, prayer. You can fast, whatever you want. But God's not religious. You talk to God at the coffee shop. And behind at your desk in the office, you can talk to him there, or in church, wherever. And he's listening. It's just trying to get him to respond that people have a hard time with it.
Just going back to the 3 days you felt his presence in your house, how do we know 3 days? Did you just know when that presence had gone? Was there a particular moment you knew that he'd left the building?
For the first 3 days, it was literally a cloud, like a white mist. It's all I can explain. It's like being in a cloud, or when you drive through fog, and then you go to the other side, it's not there. And like he said, you were dedicated to me. I knew you before you were even in your mother's womb. I knew you, and I knew who you were and the time frame you'd be born. I knew everything about your life. And he said, this may shock you, but you also knew what was going to happen in your life. You knew too. When did free will start? When you became conscious of free will? Or was it before then? When did I create it? I didn't create it after you're born. That's not when it starts. Free will has been existent from the beginning of time. Free will has always been a part of who you are, but also our relationship. So your life is a story that was created before you came here. I know the beginning, I know the end, I know everything in between. He said, but if I created your whole story of your life without you interjecting parts, I'd be violating your free will. I can't violate my nature, my character, who I am. That's a gift I've given you, but from the beginning of creation, when I created you, we knitted a story and created things in your life together. Nothing is outside of your knowledge and your consent and your permission. He said, if you know you're part of writing the story, you can't be a victim of circumstances in this life because it's outside of your ability to do anything. He said, what if you knew you were going to come to earth and be sick? What if you knew that? You can't be angry and say you're a victim of circumstances because you helped write the story, but you also helped write the outcome of the story, which is the victorious part on the other side.
So you're saying then that your soul had that agreement in the beginning, but you just didn't have the finer details. That's what comes along with the free will.
Yes, and as we're born with all of the things to be successful and creative, to be who we are. He didn't create this stuff after the fact. That's not how that works. And I've got a lot of Christian friends who are always angry. I've got many that were angry at God because maybe a spouse died or a child died or some accident happened. And they said, how come you don't get mad at God? I said, because I realized that I was complicit in writing the story. This was something that I wrote in there, or he put in together. We wrote this, but I already know the outcome. We overcome. We get beyond this. This is not where it ends. I remember being, it was 2004. I was going to Malaysia. I was in Tennessee. I got bit by a brown recluse spider on the inside of my leg. I didn't know that. Got on the plane the next day to go to Malaysia. And so I'm in Malaysia, and because of the air pressure, the poison in the spider didn't run to my body. But when I came back down to Malaysia, the poison started running to my body. Now, I didn't know I was bit, but I remember being in college over there, and one day I was laying in the men's bathroom. I was sick, but I was laying in the stall between the commode and the wall in a foreign country, and I thought I was dying. And everything inside me said, Tom, there's something going on. And I remember laying there, and I said to myself, this is not how the story ends. This is not where it will end. This is not where I will die. I've made a covenant with God. My days are numbered. He knows all the hairs on my head. I will not die in a men's bathroom in Malaysia. This will not happen. When I started speaking like that to myself, going, this is not how my story ends. It doesn't stop here. I was able to get up, and within a couple of hours, they found out about the spider bite and gave me some antibiotics. And they said, you should have died. I said, it's not my time. And I don't get mad at God when stuff happens, but I realize that these things are built in there so that we can have testimonies and stories to tell people that God's faithful and that He'll take care of us. He delivers us. He'll save us. He'll heal us. But you have to go through something in order to testify of those things. And when you go through things, people often blame God because of the circumstances. It's like, no. You guys partnered together. You wrote, a child and his father wrote the story in the beginning of time. You guys wrote, and I know this will be controversial for some people, but in the beginning, as your small child says, Daddy, your son, I want to write a story. He can only write what he understands, but Daddy will fill in the blanks. And when he gets older, and it's like, okay, Mark, you remember this? Yeah, I remember that. Well, you said this. This is the innocent parts that you knew. This is the overarching parts that you didn't understand, but the whole story works together.
Yeah. Just going back to that covenant once again, because it's so fascinating. Did you basically pick an age that you thought you chose to die, or a particular date?
You're the first one who's actually wanted to delve into asking me this. Most people just go, you're crazy. No man knows that day. I said, if I didn't know the day, I don't know how you live not knowing when you're going to die. I don't know how you live, because every day, today could be it. You could just be gone. I said, how do you plan for that? How do you plan a well-lived life when you don't know? I said, but I know. And I asked God, I said, how long do we have to do this walk? I didn't know, was it a temporary thing or 6 months? I didn't know what He was looking at. And so He said, what do you want? And I said, let me And I went back to the scripture. I started reading about people and researching people's lives. This one lived 1,000 years and 90 years and 60 years and 120 years. And after it was all finished, I went back and said, okay, I like this number. That's how I said it. I like this number. This number, that's how long I want to live. That's how long I want to live on this earth and serve you. And I said, I don't want to be sick. I don't want to be broken. I don't want to be in a walker, a wheelchair. No medicine. I'd want none of that stuff. I want to be healthy. And I said, I'm going to put a clause. When I die, I said, I don't want nobody to come and pick me up except you. You. Since we're discussing this, I'm going to put my own terms in here. I want you to come the day of my passing. I want you to show up and to bring me home to glory. He said, okay, I'll honor the number of the days you ask and everything in between. And we cut a covenant. We didn't have to cut a knife or blood or nothing like that. But it was a sworn agreement between me and God, from our heart.
As it stands, you know the exact number of days?
Yeah, years. I could tell you it's odd. I'm working on a book now. I'm not going to tell you the title of the book, because the title of the book is the year that I pass. I'm actually writing it now. So I'm actually writing a book about my life in the future. I'm already writing this book now, and I'm going to put a clause saying that this book cannot be published or printed until after I leave. And then you can read it to validate and verify my life, because I'm actually writing in the future about stuff in my life that has not actually happened yet. So when you read the book, you're going to say, he wrote this in advance before it happened, and now he's gone. Because I don't want people to chase me and go, oh, touch me, heal me, pray for me. No, my day's over. I want to go to rest.
Yeah, I get you. So it's a personal date to you, but that book will come out when you've passed over.
Correct. It's in my book, and I'm actually working on it. I've been working on it a couple of years now. At my life right now, I'm 60, I'll be 68 in January. I'm still, in God's terms, I'm still midlife right now.
Just as we're just about to wrap up, you've obviously got this almost like a direct line to God. You've got very clear communication. A lot of people will be asking, how can they hear him a bit more clearly? How can they feel closer to him?
It's going to sound simple, but it's prayer. The key is prayer. Like I said earlier, I want God because I want God. I don't want God because I want stuff. If you're always going to mommy and daddy because you want stuff, as years go on, they'll feel like they're being used for stuff. But if mommy and daddy quit giving you stuff, how do you really feel about them? When you get into the types of prayer that I'm dealing with, you deal with commitments that you make to God. You can say promises, you can make commitments, but he's looking for us to see if we're responsible to keep our word. That is really a thing. When a lot of people pray, they ask God for things, but they're not responsible for how they handle the outcome, whether it works in their favor or not. When we become responsible for our part, because we have a part to play in anything God's doing, he can do sovereign, but he can't violate our free will. He wants to work with us, but we have to be responsible in our part. Because every time you fulfill your promise, you realize, I can trust you. You're going to keep your word. And so the more he can trust you, the more he reveals to you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tom Hayden. And is there any part which resonated with you most? If so, then let us know in the comment section below. And by the way, there's actually much more to Tom's story as he continued to have divine experiences over the years. He's written a testimony book which delves deeper into all of these experiences. And Tom also sends out a regular newsletter via his website at www.prophettom.com. And he also takes prayer requests on his website too. Thanks for tuning in. See you on the next video. Much love.